Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Lesson 7 of Functional English 1 for Associate Degree in Education. Dear student teachers, Lecture 7 is about giving instructions. And as teachers, I think you know the importance of giving instructions. In fact, teaching itself sometimes is called instructions or instruction giving. Another name for lecturers could be instructors, because most often we instruct our students in the classes. So it's one of the key skill, one of the important speech function that we teachers have to perform in our classes. So today we will look at giving instructions, but first let's have a review of what we learned in lecture number 6. In lecture 6 we learned how to follow directions, how to structure clear directions. We also learned how to read a city map. And while we were doing it, we also learned some sub-skills that were involved in it. And these sub-skills are vocabulary related to transitions. We also learned how to use imperative form of sentences. And we also learned prepositions of place and motion. In fact, today's lecture, lecture number 7, is in a way connected to lecture number 6, because directions and instructions are probably similar in certain ways. In directions, we particularly focused on city maps and locating a particular place and finding a particular route or finding a particular way. In instructions, we will talk about general instructions. So let's look at the objectives of lesson number 7. After completing this lecture number 7, and if you complete it along with all the suggestions or along with all the practice situations, you should be able to, number 1, carry out instructions. That means if someone else gives you instructions, whether you are able to follow those instructions or not. Number 2, you will be able to structure clear instructions. This probably is the most important of our lecture, because giving clear instructions is probably what we require as teachers. And along with these two key skills, we will also learn some sub-skills, like we'll learn some time connective words. Don't be frightened of such a big, huge term. I'll explain it. It's pretty simple. We'll also learn how to use action words while giving instructions, and how to set conditions for these action words. If you are not sure what these are, just relax. I'll explain it in a minute. And in the end, we'll also focus on how to give oral instructions, something that we quite often do in our classes. Okay, before we formally start, let's look at some of the questions that we need to consider for lecture number 7. Let's look at the first question first. What are instructions? Well, instructions are a step-by-step guide on how to make or do something, right? And instructions can be either spoken or they can be written. So instructions, as you can see, can be very general, and instructions are not given randomly or offhandedly Instead, we have clear step-by-step guide of either making something or doing something. For example, if I ask you to how to cook rice and you give me a recipe, that would be a step-by-step guide for how to make for making rice or for cooking rice. Why are instructions important? In our life, I think we all need instructions certain times. Whenever we are doing something for the first time, we need clear-cut instructions. And in all civilized societies, usually we have written instructions to do certain things. And even if we know how to do something, it's better to follow the clear-cut instructions for various other reasons. Let's look at some of the reasons. One reason is that they save time. So if we have a step-by-step standard operating procedure, instead of doing it out of our own experience, we point-wise, we can do anything quickly by following these instructions, and this will definitely save time. Second thing is they save confusion, because different people have different way of doing things, and you can't really say that one way is the standard and the second, especially for delivering lectures, for example, in the classroom. Everyone has his or her own way of delivering it. As long as it meets the basic objectives, I don't think there should be any problem with that. But sometimes different varying styles of the teachers may confuse the students, because different teachers expect different things from their students. So if we have a clear-cut, structured, well-ordered guideline, both for the students as well as for the teachers, probably it will reduce this confusion. I won't say it would eliminate confusion, because there still might be confusion, because definitely in teaching, information is transferring, so there is lack of information on one side, or you might call it as information gap activity. Definitely when you are learning new skills, you are learning new knowledge, sometimes there are confusions. Even if the instructions are clear, it might take a little bit of time before you are well versed in it. Okay, another reason why we need instructions is to maintain uniformity or a standard. As I said earlier, different people have different ways of doing things, and that could add confusion, but that could also add lack of uniformity. So in order to make it standardized, in order to maintain uniformity, we need to follow the instructions, well chalked out instructions. And the last thing is that they are easy to evaluate. So if we want to look at the process for self-learning, or for evaluation purposes, or for making any positive changes in future, it's easy to evaluate the efficiency of the task. So if we have written instructions in front of us, we can evaluate someone's performance on the basis of those instructions. So in other words, these instructions can also serve as the checkpoints, or they can serve as the criterion for evaluating someone's work. In other words, instructions are very important in our life, and it's better to learn it as early as possible. Now, in order to give you an idea of how important instructions are, we are going to look at the next question, that is, can you name some common types of instructions? There can be different kinds of instructions, but usually you find written instructions, such as recipe books. A recipe is a detailed or a step-by-step guideline of how to cook something, how to make something. like how to boil an egg. There might be a recipe for that. Or how to make biryani. Definitely these recipes are instructions, and they are well structured, well ordered. Similarly, when you play computer games or games on your mobile phones, you have instructions on how to play it. Similarly, you have gardening guides if you want to plant a tree or flowers or vegetables. You find books in which detailed step-by-step guidelines are given for planting. You have craft books for learning art and craft. For example, you might have heard about origami, which is an art of making things from paper. So you might be asked to make a paper boat, for example. So there are various steps involved in it, and there is a procedure for doing it. You might find such instructions, detailed instructions for making sketches, cartoon characters, and various other art pieces. Similarly, you find these instructions in science experiments, how to conduct an experiment. There is a set procedure for that. And before procedure, there is a list of equipment that is required during that experiment. So definitely these instructions help in planning for those experiments, in maintaining the lab, and making it more effective for the students. And it is also helpful for the teachers as well as the students. Similarly, we have instruction manuals, and I won't talk in detail about instruction manuals because our lecture is planned on that. We also have detailed instructions about religious rites. For example, how to perform Hajj or Umrah, and there are detailed instructions that are often given to the people who want to go to pilgrimage, who want to offer Hajj. So you know that there are instructional CDs, instructional books and lectures specifically for training these people who want to perform Hajj. Similarly, you have safety manuals, which are like instruction manuals, and we'll talk about it in the next lecture. We have instructions on traffic rules, like how to cross the road. We have public awareness campaigns. There can be instructions on how to do certain things at mass level. For example, how to cast your votes. In various countries, they have instructional videos on how to cast your vote in order to educate and in order to train the common people in the street. Now, let me ask you a question. How often do you follow or give instructions in your life? Do you follow or give instructions daily, weekly, monthly, or just once in a blue moon? Well, since you are teachers and I have already talked about giving instructions in the class, so probably you give it quite frequently in your classes. And I'm not sure about the frequency of following instructions, but I'm sure that you often give instructions to your students in the classes. Okay, now let's look at one example of instructions. And we will start with a recipe, which is probably the easiest of all the instructions. And we'll look at how to make porridge. You know what porridge is? Urdu में जिसे हम दलिया कहते हैं. Do you know how to make porridge? The chances are that you know, but it's not easy to explain it to others how to make porridge, because you might be proficient in making porridge, but you might not be very good at instructing others on how to do it. For that we need discipline, for that we need a particular bent of mind, we need to plan a lot of things, we need to keep a lot of things in mind before our instructions are clearly stated. Okay, so let's look at the instructions for making porridge. You know, instructions normally have two sections in it. So we are looking at the first section, which is you will need. So in this first section, we will look at the material which is required to perform this task or to make porridge. We need 1 cup of porridge oats, we need 2 cups of milk, cup, bowl, spoon and microwave. It's a good idea to give pictures along with these objects because for example, look at porridge oats, you might not know what oats are. So it's better to give a picture so that the people who don't have a lot of knowledge or who have limited knowledge, even they can understand it. So it's always a good idea to have pictures along with the objects. Okay, now we move on to the second section of the instructions. In the second section we have the procedure or the way to make porridge in this particular example. So you again have a picture and here you also have number 1. Step number 1 is mix together the porridge oats and milk in a microwavable basin, right? And if you just look at this instruction, it starts with a verb. It starts with the action verb mix, right? And this is an imperative. An imperative sentence starts with a verb. It doesn't start with a subject. Okay, so this is step number 1. Let's move on. Step 2 is microwave for 2 minutes. And you might wonder whether microwave is a noun or a verb, but rest assured that here it is used as a verb. So this is also an imperative sentence. Microwave for 2 minutes means place it in a microwave for 2 minutes, right? So microwave here has been used as a verb. Step number 3, stir, right? Stir means to to shake or to move around the contents in the bowl, as you can see in the picture. Then microwave for a further 1 minute 30 seconds. So step number 3 is that you stir it and then you place it in the microwave for another minute and 30 seconds. Okay, we move on to the next 4th step. Step number 4 is leave to stand for 1 minute, then serve the porridge. So serve the porridge after 1 minute, adding honey or syrup if desired. Syrup means sugary liquid with sugar in it. So you see that there are 5 steps involved in making a porridge. The first 4 steps actually are essential for making the porridge, and step number 5 is eat and enjoy, the last step. So you see, in this very easy instruction, we looked at 2 sections. First section is about the ingredients and the second section is about the procedure. And we also learned that instructions are given in step-by-step way, and these instructions are written in imperative sentences, very clear, simple sentences, and they are usually accompanied by pictures, illustrations. Okay, now let's look at another set of instructions. This time we are going to learn how to tie a bow tie. There are different kinds of ties. We have a necktie, as I am wearing one. We also have a bow tie that usually some people wear. So you just look at this screen here and you will find that there are 9 steps to doing it, and you have a picture almost for every step. And here you don't have the first section because certainly for some instructions it is quite obvious that in order to tie a bow tie you need a tie. So you don't need to mention things that are required for it. I'm not going to read it out, but I just want you to look at the first word of each of these steps. So look at the first sentence, make one end longer than the other. Make is a verb. The second sentence, take longest end and fold over shorter end. So you have the verb take. Next one is pull. Now in step 4 it starts with now, but after now we have form, which is a verb. Okay, and then we have fold in step number 5. In step number 6 we have pull. Step number 7 starts with feed. Step number 8 starts with tighten, and that's all. So basically there are 8 steps involved in it. The 9th step is for further information. So you looked at 2 kinds of instructions that should give you a pretty good idea of what we mean by instructions. Although it was easy to show you instructions in the written form, but as I told you earlier, remember that instructions can be both oral as well as written. And very often in the classroom we give oral instructions. Okay, we move on. Now this time we don't have a set of instructions given, we just have the illustrations or a set of pictures, a series of pictures which are numbered. So if you just look at the first picture, by first picture I mean the upper left picture, you will find this you will need. Okay, so you will need these things. Can you tell me what you will need for making a cup of tea? You need, yes, that's right, you need water, you need a cup, you need an electric kettle, that's right, you need, yeah, you need milk, you need tea, and you need sugar. Okay, so after looking at these pictures, this set of pictures, I would like you to write down instructions for making a cup of tea. So grab a piece of paper and a pencil, look at these pictures and try to write a sentence for each one of these. What will you need? You will need, and then you can write down in bullet points, you can write down the items that are required for making tea. Okay, look at step 1. So what imperative sentence can describe this process? Maybe pour some water into the electric kettle, or you can say add some water into the electric kettle. That's right. Number 2, plug in the electric kettle. Plug in the electric kettle. Number 3, add some tea or a tea bag into your cup. Add some tea leaves in your cup. Okay, number 4, when the water boils after a minute or 2, or wait until the water boils in the kettle. Wait until the water boils in the kettle. Step number 5. Pour hot water into the cup. Pour hot water or boiling water into the cup. Number 6. Stir it with a spoon. Number 7. Wait for a minute or few seconds. A minute, I would say. Then number 8. Add some sugar. Number 9. Add some milk. Number 10. Stir the tea. And number 11. Drink. So you would see that how to make a cup of tea. By looking at simple pictures, you can actually construct your own instructions. Here is a checklist. What things should you keep in mind when you prepare instructions? So when you write instructions, you need to make sure that you have included a title for instructions. This is really important because without the title, of course, it would be like a headless monster, and people won't understand really what they are doing or making. So you need to give a clear title first. For example, how to boil an egg, or boiling eggs, or instructions on boiling eggs. So these could be 3 titles that you can give if you are teaching someone how to boil eggs. Okay, then make sure that you have included a list of things required. But this is optional, as we learned earlier that for making a cup of tea, we need to know what things are required. But for tying a bow tie, probably it is quite obvious that we require a tie. And you can usually give a subtitle to this section, and this subtitle could be either the phrase you will need, or it could be the phrase the word equipment, or ingredients, or material, etc. Okay, the next thing is that make sure that you have ordered your instructions. And you can order your instructions in a logical way, in a chronological way. You can order it by writing it in bullet points, or you can give a lettered list like A, B, C, D, or the preferred way is to give instructions in a numbered list like 1, 2, 3. Okay, then also make sure that you have used action words. Your imperative sentences should actually start, most of the times they should start with the action words. And what are the action words? Verbs that involve actions like cook, stir, boil, rinse, paint, cut, etc. These are some verbs that involve action. Can you think of some other verbs that involve actions? Yes, there are a lot of verbs. You can say like sit, open, tear. All these involve actions. So they are called action words. Okay, the next thing that you need to keep in mind is to make sure that you have added any conditions for action. Sometimes we don't just want the actions, we also want these actions to be completed or performed in under particular conditions. Like while pressing the left side of the mouse, drag it. So drag is the action, but while pressing the left side of the mouse is the condition. Okay, or we can also have carefully stir the tea. So the adverb carefully adds condition to this verb. Most of the times we have adverbs to add conditions to this, but we will also learn some other ways to add these conditions. Okay, now the most important thing that you must make sure is that you have used short, clear sentences in your instructions. So instead of writing put the ingredients into water and rub, you can use one simple verb for it, and that is rinse. Rinse is like washing something with water. For example, before you cook rice, you rinse it. By rinse, I mean you wash it in water. Okay, so instead of giving long, unclear instructions, you should look for the precise, the exact word that can describe the process, that can describe that action. Okay, we move on to using time connectives. And as I said earlier, time connectives are not very difficult at all. They are simply the words like first, second, then, lastly, until, after, before, etc. These words are important because usually these set of instructions are in a series. So one follows the other. And you have to make sure that your listeners or readers, they are following you. And how can you ensure that? By using proper time connectives. And in the end, I think this is again optional, but it is advisable that for your written instructions you use certain illustrations, and for oral instructions you can use the demonstrations. Okay, now here we have an activity. Here you have 12 set of instructions on how to make mashed potato. All right, I would like you to go through it, take some time, go through this slide, and once you have finished it, I would like you to improve this set of instructions. If any steps, for example, are not required, cross them out. If you think that instructions are quite obvious, very detailed, cut them short. If you think instructions are unclear, make them clear, and make sure that you use all the checklist that we learned earlier. Okay, so look at this slide for a minute or two, and then see how you can change it. Okay, now I hope you looked at it, you have gone through it, and in your mind you have prepared your notes, mental notes on how you can improve it. Let's try to improve it together. How to make mashed potato. The title, I think you don't need to change it. The picture is also okay. What about the first sentence? Go into the kitchen and open the cupboard door. Do you think it is really important to give this instruction? Yes, you are right. We don't need to give this instruction. It is pretty obvious. After all, we are talking to the human beings who are intelligent, and we are not giving these instructions to a robot, for example. Okay, so we have crossed out the first step. Look at the second one. If we make it first now, take out a large pan, take out a pan lid as well, go to the fridge or wherever you keep your potatoes and get some potatoes out. One large potato for each person should be just about the right amount. Now, do you think these instructions are short and clear? They are not. So what should you do? You should cross it out. Okay, then you need to add one important section, and that is you will need section or ingredients section. So here you can say a pan with a lid, a peeler, potato masher, a knife, one large potato per person, milk and butter to taste. Alright, now let's look at the procedure. So far we have not included any of the steps. First step would be take a potato peeler and peel all the brown skin off the potato. Mind you don't cut your fingers or anything. So do you think this sentence is clear enough? It isn't. So instead of writing that, you can simply write carefully peel the potatoes. All the other information is probably unnecessary here. Peel the potatoes. When you use the word peel, you don't need to say the brown skin, right? Peel itself has this meaning in it. So peel the potatoes is enough, and instead of giving the complete sentence as make sure that you don't cut your fingers, you can simply write the adverb carefully. So carefully peel the potatoes should be the first step of our instructions. Okay, what about this one? With a knife that is sharp, cut the potatoes up into bits that are quite small. Okay, instead of it, you can say with a sharp knife, cut the potato into small pieces. Step number 3, put the bits of potato into the pan you got out of the cupboard before. Again, you know that there are lots of unnecessary words, so we need to get rid of them. And we need to write a simple sentence such as, place the potatoes in the pan. Okay, step number 4, put some water into the pan so that the potatoes are all covered over with water. Instead of such a long sentence, what umbrella word would you use for putting the potatoes under water and covering them with water? Yes, you can simply say cover with water, or you can say soak in water, S-O-A-K, soak. Okay, instead of carry the pan over to the cooker and put it on the cooker, turn the cooker on. Again, this is redundant information. This is very obvious. We don't need to place this information. Instead, we can change it with this simple sentence as place on the cooker. And you don't need to tell that turn on the cooker. It is very obvious. Okay. Okay, let's look at the next step, which again is very long one. The potatoes need to boil for quite a while, probably somewhere around 15 minutes or so. You will know they are ready when you prick them with a fork and they are softish. Instead of such a lengthy sentence, you can have a simple one, boil for 15 minutes until soft. Okay, and leave it to your audience on how to find out whether they are soft or not. So you see, you would realize that while improving on this set of instructions, you have actually crossed out almost 70% of the original instructions. Again, you have a lengthy sentence. You have keep the lid on the pan, hold it carefully. It will be hot, so it might be a good idea. Put a tea towel on your hand. let all of the water come out of the pan and go down the sink. Again, you would say that these instructions are probably useful for some robot or a computer, but not to a human being. For a human being, we would have a simple sentence like drain the water off the potatoes. Okay, get the potato masher and use it to squash up all of the big bits of potato. So how would you rephrase it in order to make it clear and simple? Here is one suggestion. You can simply say mash the potatoes. Of course, you would mash it with a potato masher, so you don't need to say that. You simply say mash the potatoes. Okay, step number 9. If you think it will taste nice, you can put some milk and butter into the mashed potato. Instead of such a long sentence, again, you can simply say add milk and butter to taste. So here we have the action words. Peel. In this sentence, we have peel the potatoes. So the action word is peel. And the word carefully sets the condition for this action word. Step 2, we have the action word which is cut. Step 3, place. And remember, place can also be used as a noun, but here it is used as a verb. Again, cover here is used as a verb, so it is the action word. Again, we have place, the same action word. For number 6, we have boil. Step number 7, we have the action word drain. For step number 8, we have the action word mash. And number 9 is add. So if you just look at these yellow arrows, you will find the action words that carry the main information. In fact, your focus should be on the action word itself, and sometimes also the conditions that go along with it. Okay, now let's look at some common time connective words. Along with the action words, you also need some time connective words. So you can say firstly or first, secondly, thirdly. You can say first, second, third, fourth, but you can also say firstly, secondly, thirdly, and finally, lastly. Okay, you can say during, following that means after that. Both have the same meaning. Meanwhile and during probably have the same meaning. Next, now, then, you are well aware of these, but I would like you to write them down as time connective words because they are really important when you are making your own instructions. Subsequently means afterwards, and in the end means the same as finally or lastly. Okay, now action words can be different for various actions. In fact, it is a good idea that you make a phrase book, and in that phrase book you write action words for various situations. For example, right now we are talking about cooking, so for cooking you can make a list such as this one. You know the difference between this? Bake. Bake is when you cook something in an oven. Beat is like beat the eggs, for example. Blend, that is something that you do in a blender. Okay, boil, chop, crush, fry, grate, heat. If you don't know the meaning of any of these words, I'm not going to teach you these words. You can look them up in a dictionary. I think probably the only word that you would feel difficult is simmer, which is like boiling. Boiling is cooking something in water, and simmering is cooking something in water for a long period of time on a low flame. So simmer is like boil, but it is boiling for a long period of time and on a low flame. Okay. All right, so these are some action words that you can use for cooking, and it is advisable that you make a list of such action words for other situations as well. Okay, now we move on and we look at how we can set conditions for these actions. One way to set these conditions, set conditions for these actions could be by using a present participle. And what do I mean by present participle is simply the ing form of verb. Like instead of hold, if I say holding, this could be the present participle when it is used as a verb in a sentence. Like you can say holding one end of the string, give a knot, or you can use any other action verb along with it, but holding one end of the string could be a condition. So our condition actually starts with present participle, which is holding. Holding your pen tight, right in the box. Stirring the soup gently. Okay. You can say like stirring the soup gently, add some sauce into it. Stirring the soup gently, add some sauce into it. Similarly, you can say waiting, and this time we also have the time connective word before it, after waiting for 5 minutes. So you can have these conditions starting with present participle or time connective and present participle. So these are called participle phrases. In other words, you can set the condition for these action words by using participle phrases. And as we learned earlier, apart from present participles, we can also use adverbs to set conditions for these actions. We can use adverbs such as gradually, slowly, carefully. And you remember earlier we said carefully cut the potatoes. So carefully sets the condition for the action cut. You might be wondering why I am focusing too much on these sentences and the way we should construct them, because usually while giving instructions we forget and we give very lengthy, unclear sentences, and that adds to the confusion. So it is important that our instructions are step by step, and each step most of the time starts with an action word. Sometimes along with an action word we also have an adverb to set a condition, or sometimes we can even have participle phrase. We can use present participle for setting a condition for this these action words. Okay, now I give you some practice situations. Like always, I would expect that you would try to practice the skills, and you will try to follow the guidelines that I gave you. And for that, what you need to do is you need to find a partner and give these instructions orally to your partner. But before you start doing it, spend some time with a piece of paper, plan what you are going to say, and plan how you are going to order that information, because it's not easy giving instructions offhand. If you try to give instructions offhand, usually they are very confusing and they are not very effective. Okay, here are some situations. At least you should practice 3 of these situations. And of course this is not an exhaustive list. You can add to this list, and you can think of other situations that in which you need to give instructions. For example, you need to give oral instructions to someone about how to make a paper plane. I'm sure as a child you all could make a paper plane, and sometimes you have to teach the kids, sometimes you have to teach your students how to make a paper plane. So think, plan how you can give these instructions to someone, and then finally find a partner and give these instructions. And it is better that for this situation, if you find a kid or a child who doesn't know how to make a paper plane already. So he or she should be able to make a paper plane after following your directions, after following your instructions. Okay, another instruction that you can give is on how to perform ablution or how to perform wudu. Before prayer, we are Muslims, they perform ablution or they perform wudu before prayer, and very often we have to instruct our students, especially the teachers who teach Islamiyat, they have to instruct their students. But if you are a non-Muslim, it's okay, you can replace it with anything else, any other religious rite of the religion that you follow. Okay, next is something which I like very much, and I'm sure that you also do. How to make mango milkshake, and try to give instructions about making a mango milkshake to someone who has never made it before, and see how successful or how effective your instructions have been. Okay, plant a rose. Maybe this would not be easy for all of you, because in order to instruct someone else, first you need to have information yourself. Okay, how to change a flat tire, how to deliver a presentation, and I think this is something that often in the classroom we have to instruct our students on how to deliver a presentation, and how to clean a water tank. Try to think of various steps involved in it. Don't simply say that clean a tank. That won't be enough. In fact, you need to break it down into smaller steps and think of the appropriate steps and then properly order them. So here you have some practice situations, and I sincerely hope that all of you would find some partners and you would try to practice it at home or at your workplaces. Now once again I go through the main points of lecture number 7, and I repeat some ideas so that you have an idea on how to give instructions. First of all, we started lecture number 7 with the point that what instructions are and why these instructions are important. So do you still remember what instructions are? How to define instructions? Instructions means giving step-by-step guideline on how to make or how to do something. So it's a step-by-step guideline for making or doing something. And why are instructions important? Yes, they are important to save time, they are important to save confusion, and it's easy to evaluate, and you can also set standards, you can maintain quality, and you can maintain uniformity. Well, in lecture 7 we learned how to carry out instructions, how to structure clear instructions. This is really important. Remember the mashed potato exercise that we just did? We need to structure clear instructions. Then we learned how to use time connective words. In lecture number 7, we also learned how to use action words. And although we looked at the action words for cooking, but I would appreciate if you could make such word lists for other actions. For presentations, for example, explain, demonstrate, maintain an eye contact, interact, ask. These are some action verbs that you can use for lecturing. Okay, then we also learned how to set conditions for these actions, and in particular we learned two ways how we can set conditions for these actions. One way was using present participle, that is using ing form of the verb, like holding, thinking, stirring, tying, etc., etc. Another way to set conditions for actions was to use adverbs such as carefully, gradually, you can say quickly, slowly, gently, etc., etc. And in the end, you also learned how to give oral instructions. So I think we cannot, I cannot overemphasize the role of instructions in the lives of teachers, because one of the prime objectives of teaching is to instruct. And that's the reason why teachers are sometimes called instructors, right? Although you might like to differentiate between instructors and lecturers and teachers at some points, but I think sometimes, no matter whether you are a lecturer, professor, assistant professor, or whatever your job title is, but still you have to instruct your students. And even if you don't instruct your students, you have to use instructions yourself for carrying out a lot of things. Like I was given detailed instructions on how to get these lectures recorded, right? And probably you have also been given instructions on how to use LMS, Learning Management System of Virtual Concerts. And probably you have received a handbook that gives you, or a course book that gives you details and instructions on how to use the study material, how to access these video lectures, and how to do your quizzes and assignments and all that stuff. So this is pretty much the basis of the instruction plan, of the teaching plan. And in education, I think we cannot really deny its importance. We should practice, and we should use the phrases for giving out instructions very clearly. And it's not only an important skill for us as teachers, it is also important skill for our students. So we also need to sometimes give such situations to our students in the classroom, and we can, for example, ask a group of students or individuals to come in front of the class and give instruction on a particular topic. But remember, because instructions are not easy to plan and structure and order, so give ample time to your students. Give them prompts, I mean give them some situations in which they can give instructions. And it's better that rather giving instructions all the times as teachers, sometimes instead we take the back seat and we ask one of our students to or in fact we can ask different individuals to think about various instructions. We can give them some time to plan and order and even write, and maybe we can give this task as a homework, and when these students come back we can ask them to deliver their oral instructions, or we can ask them to give written instructions. For example, I have often used it in my own classes, and some of the students, they are really very good at cooking. Others are very good at playing football or cricket. And some of them are good at other skills like typing and swimming or horse riding. It is very good if we ask them to choose a skill of their own interest, and then we give them an ample time to write down a set of instructions following the guidelines that you have given them, and then they can deliver it into the class. And in the end, I think it is also good to evaluate those instructions. So instead of just taking it casually, we can make a set of criteria. We can even ask other students to evaluate each other's presentations by looking at certain points. For example, if you remember the checklist, we need to check if the instructions have an appropriate heading. So instructions must have appropriate heading. Then instructions should include ingredients. It is optional, of course, but then whether the students have used proper action words or not, whether they have used time connections or not, and whether they have set the conditions for it or not. So we need to look at all these criteria and evaluate our students on the basis of this criteria. So I would like you to practice these instructions for yourself and also make your students practice it in their classes. Hope it has been really very useful, and see you in the next lecture. Thank you.